Welcome back to Music Theory Logic. Andrew here, and today I'm going to be talking about the sound design on a remix that currently is unreleased, but I think I'm going to drop it on my SoundCloud and Audius on Friday. The artist confirms that that is totally okay. Let's go into the Logic session. So if you happen to follow me on Instagram, you probably heard this. I posted a reel of this last week, and I got a lot of inquiries as to where the sounds come from. It may have been a little misleading to some people since I have these two Serum patches open that are playing, but the fundamental lead that you're hearing is actually a piece of audio from the original track that I have manipulated. And fear not, I'm going to show you all those channels, and we're going to focus on the Serum and the effects routing on that lead. So if you find these helpful, you would help me out a lot by subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, here is the 4 bars before the drop and the first half of the drop section. Then we'll talk about the sound design.
You know, never thought I could get so high, so way up in the sky. 'Cause
Cool. So that covers the 3 sounds that I'm going to show you today. So to get the Serum stuff out of the way, the first bass hit that I'm getting right on the 1, let me turn out my metronome, is not actually one that I built. All right, so that patch, if you still have all of the presets that came literally with Serum, if you go to bass, I'm on the B-A-D bass 1 D.R.U. I believe that just came default with Serum. And if we look at the patch, they're using all 4 oscillators. A is FFT acid, looks very similar to the bass drum sine. Then we've got the default waveform, getting volume of both of those. We're getting a noise, ARP pink. All right, that is not key tracking. We get the sub oscillator down an octave, and then there's just a low pass filter. Really, really simple sound. I could have built that, but again, something that helps me, and a lot of producers will talk about this, but I like to spend days building sounds or sessions building sounds and then sessions getting creative. So I think I went through some of the basses that I had built, and I found that this BAD bass works. And it's funny, when I first got into dance music production, there was a lot of like a real opposition from people in the scene of using presets, and some of the like irony there is that a lot of artists were getting help on their sound design, and nowadays, like if you follow Back to Back with Willie Joy, if you're into this kind of music, highly recommend that podcast. It's absolutely awesome. Willie, if you happen to see this, huge respect. I really enjoy hearing different producers from different styles each week talking about stuff. And I'm trying to think, I feel like Ray Volpe was the one talking about how like mentioning presets, or it's not the end of the world. I've also seen memes where it's like, you know, I'm gonna get this wrong, but it's like, you know, I didn't want to sample something, so I recorded an instrument. I didn't want to use an instrument that was built, so I built a guitar. And I didn't want to use strings that were pre-manufactured, so I learned how to make strings, something like that. And if you really think about it, it's kind of absurd. Jimi Hendrix didn't design the Stratocaster that he mastered playing, and I think you shouldn't feel afraid to use presets. It's honestly the best way of learning to build sounds too. I've talked about that in breakaway videos, but say I love this bass on the right, I could open a default instance of Serum and then basically just match it until it sounds the same. And that is exactly what I did to learn how to do this. In addition to watching, like most notably, Virtual Riot streams, he is absolutely a beast at the Serum stuff, and also AU5, huge YouTuber. So this I have called my D.R.U huge organ wobble lead. All right, so looks like most of it's controlled by this LFO. Number 9, let's hear this with the bass that we just heard. So it's that gritty rhythmic bass. All right, so first of all, oscillator A is magnet as my wavetable. I am oscillator B. I've got growl table 12 from Cymatics. Then I'm using the sub oscillator. Everything aside from the growl table in oscillator B is at the original octave, so oscillator B is down an octave. I am using the noise oscillator key tracking set to air can, and then I have once again the LFO doing most of this sound changement. So first of all, in my envelope, or in my automatic my A warp as Serum calls it, I'm tying my LFO1 to it, and I have it set to bend minus. All right, if we just hear that on its own. All right, if we add the down an octave one, now I'm also controlling the level of the oscillator A, the wavetable position of oscillator B, and the level of B. Together, those sound like this. We add in our sub oscillator, it's going to fill it in. So it gets like stronger, denser. And then if I add the noise, just a little bit of air. Cool. Now I've altered the envelope in addition to playing with LFO1. All right, so LFO1 is controlling the volume of every single oscillator. Oscillators create the sounds, or they play the wavetables, which are the sounds that we manipulate in synthesizers like Serum. And so if we tie the LFO to every level or every volume of the oscillators, it's going to go from no volume, or the lowest that the lines are, in this case it's 0, up to the peak top of where the line is when it reaches its max. And then I have this tied to the BPM. It's set to a quarter note, and it is off in terms of its I'm not triggering it like every time there's a MIDI note. That creates the wobble stays going, and so if I hit something on an off note, it's gonna be in time with the other ones essentially. That you don't have to do. But if we go to our effects, I'm using hyperdimension expander. That is just set no control from the actual LFO tool. I'm using distortion diode, and I'm controlling the mix. This is something really, really common that I do in a lot of my sounds. It sort of allows it to not be like too gritty, but like by automating the mix, when we get to the peak amount, there's going to be as much distortion as possible with that one. And then finally, I've got a filter going at the end. So what's really interesting about that is if we were to turn this off, sound's going to be very different. All right, so everything else I mentioned builds that fundamental sound, and then this filter basically, it tames it a lot, so we're cutting out a lot of the high frequencies, so it's a low pass filter, so the lower part of the sound is getting to our ears, we're hearing it, and once again, I'm controlling that with the LFO, so it's opening up as the sound goes, and it's closing, but it's never fully open. So the amount of grit I get would be based on where that line is. All right, cool. So let's go back to the full drop, and then I'll go through the bridge horns. Now, social media is, I used to hate it so much, probably like dating myself a little bit with that, but I've really changed a lot, and I don't try to focus on the portions of it that I don't like, but really the cool part of it. And the cool thing is, like, I posted this reel, did some hashtagging, and some other producers commented on it, and I actually created a few relationships with producers who I'm talking to and whose music I like. So one of whom is doing a remix of one of my other songs, and another producer who goes by KNNO out of Argentina is really, really accomplished what like our music audiences in America would call reggaeton or Latin music, but super, super cool. And reggaeton has taken over our markets, and I look forward to working with KNNO. But he was asking me with Serum, how did I make that vocal type sound? And I imagine this is the sound that he was talking about, our main sample, which sounds like this. All right, so once again, I made that from the original sound inside of Stable. So let's unmute these regions. Now, if you go and listen to Stable by Honey Ribar, that is, this is a remix of that song. Honey is an incredibly talented singer and has some really cool pop, indie pop music. A lot of it sounds like it should already be on the radio. So if you are into that kind of style or the vocals that you heard before the drop, go and check out her music. And if you listen to Honey Ribar Stable, which I'll try to link below, that song has a horn in it, and we hear it in the intro, we hear it in the background. And when she asked me to do a remix on this, I instantly gravitated towards that layer and was like, that's super cool. I want to figure out how to do that. So just making sure we're still going. Without any of my effects, that's what this layer sounds like. Now, I approached this kind of like I approach a vocal chop. So I got the original sample. I could probably even play it for you if I remember to get rid of this. So without the chopping, it sounded like this. All right, and I basically took a lot of similar elements of that. I chopped out notes, and so that's why you see these individual audio clips. I basically cut it up like I did a vocal. I talked about this vocal chop for this similar video I did for my single with Pip Lewis, Reveled in the Sins, and what drives that that drop in the melodic or the top end of it is the vocal chop. And once again, I do this kind of the same thing. I chopped out sounds I wanted from it. All right, but here's where the real money comes from. So first of all, Little Altar Boy from Sound Toys is super cool for manipulating the pitch and formats of audio. That I have going down an octave formats, and I have it going down 0.1 in pitch. That just kind of darkens it a little bit, makes it slightly out of key. All right, so let's turn that on. So just from that plugin, I'm driving it pretty hard to make it louder. So that's why it's so much louder, but down an octave. Cool. Next thing I do is go through a virtual guitar amp. This is a really, really cool technique for making things, giving a little bit of like organic glue or some interesting sounds, harmonics to it. All right, we're pretty close. Next thing I did was send it through my UAD LA2A. I am squashing it pretty hard. That's basically to make the whole thing, not just the whole thing louder, but to make it more constant dynamically. Since this is the main drop sound for this drop, I wanted it to be pretty big. All right, cool. We're hearing some other changes. I'll address that in 1 second. All right, so after that, I'm going into H delay, just a very little bit of dotted eighth note delay, ping-ponging. That kind of puts this in a space. Cool. Then finally, I am just cutting off all of the low frequencies. This is the melody. I want the subs and the bass to really drive that this low portion of the song. So that's why I did that. All right. So then finally, if I go into automation, all right, Little Altar Boy pitch. So what I've done here is I've basically made this kind of like a playable sample by automating the pitch. So within Little Altar Boy, the knob on the left, that's going to change the note a lot. So I'm going to go between -1 semitones all the way up to 6 semitones, and that's going to make it feel like the note goes up. Let's hear that. So really, really fun technique. It works super well in lots of different styles of music, but especially dance music. If you're working with a sample, you can literally use Little Altar Boy from Sound Toys. Pretty affordable plugin as well for what it does. And you can automate the pitch and the formats, and then all of a sudden you can kind of like play your sample like you are triggering it via a keyboard and repitching it. There's a lot of ways to create the sound of that those horns different than how I did it, but I find that it's not really like how we do it, but whatever works for your workflow. And for me personally, like it really depends. If I had chopped this vocal out and I didn't, or chopped the saxophone out and I didn't like what I came up with, I might then take some hits and load it into a sampler like EXS24 built into Logic, and then I could play around with triggering those samples with MIDI. But really, I just try to use my ear, try to stay in the moment, and adapt that way. I should mention the effects chain on this. So I'm using LFO tool from Extra Records, same company that makes Serum, and I'm doing that to do some sort of like quarter note, almost like a side chain pumping sound. Which makes it a lot more rhythmic there. If I go into our next plugin, I'm using FGX from Slate to further compress that sound, make it bigger. I then have an EQ, I believe, because I automate this high pass towards the end of it, just to fade it away. And then finally, I'm going into Pultec EQ, again from Universal Audio, and it looks like I am boosting 100 hertz from this, giving it a little bit more punch, and then also boosting 5,000 hertz, which is something that I really overlooked for a long time in all styles of music. But one of my big new techniques is really using EQs that sound really good to increase sort of like high-end harmonics, especially on vocals. That helps a lot. And then finally, like when you're thinking about a drop like this, where this takes the place of the vocal in terms of our main solo instrument, you can really think about that like you would think about a vocal, like where it sits in the mix, how you're manipulating it, effects that are on it, all those things. And it looks like that is going into just my room reverb. So I'll play this one more time. If you have any questions on what I just covered, I'm happy to talk about it. I'm not really leaving out any instruments aside from this one. All right, so that's a really weird sound. I'm using Isotope Jr. to the Kodo-ish, so it sounds like a Kodo. Without this effect, it really isn't going to sound at all like what you just heard. All right, so here's the money. I'm using the intense reverb, literally called Intensity, from Arturia to on its pitch bend or its down auto effect for that. So I'm on, Falling, the preset. And I didn't manipulate that preset at all. I just cleaned it up with basically an EQ filtering out the highs and the lows. So I really just get this one frequency range that helps with that. So with all of that, those are all the main sounds in this drop section. I will play it one more time. I hope you enjoyed this, and stay tuned. Again, SoundCloud and Audius probably on this Friday, like August 6th. Here it is.
You know, never thought I could get so high, so way up in the sky. 'Cause
Cool. I would say that this is like almost entirely finished, except with the one exception of the mix. So I, whenever you're making your track or doing a remix like this from start to finish, the last final thing you want to do is make it sound really good and heavy and an experience on its own. And that is the mix down, and I thought I had it, but I did a car test over the weekend a couple days ago, and it's really too bass heavy. So I'm gonna go back in and touch the mix before it fully comes out. Let me know if you have any questions. If you'd like to see me do a full breakdown on how I did this remix, I'd be happy to do that. I hope you're having fun making music wherever you are, because that is what it's about. Thank you to all of my my friends and colleagues and other producers I've talked to for checking this stuff out. I greatly appreciate you. And again, let's just make music. It's fun and keep it fresh. So I will see you next time. Questions in the comments. Subscribe if this was helpful, and I'll talk to you later. Cheers.